You might not have seen much of it, but Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu met last night with President Obama at the White House. Their meeting was closed to press, which is a bit unusual, and Netanyahu arrived and departed the White House. That's all we saw, this video you're looking at now. There were no public statements issued afterwards. Unusual. U.S. Israeli relations have been somewhat strained in recent weeks after a dispute about new settlements that Israel is undertaking in East Jerusalem. On the same day, we heard that the United Kingdom isn't quite so happy with Israeli policy either. It's expelling an Israeli diplomat, part of a widening mystery that surrounds the killing of a senior Hamas leader in Dubai earlier this year. The alleged killers apparently used forged UK passports, and the Israeli intelligence service is suspected to be involved. So unusual to see these kind of rifts between allies. Let's talk about what this actually is a symptom of, what it signifies, and how much attention we should be paying to it. Aaron Miller is public policy scholar at the Woodrow Wilson Center. He was, as you know, a State Department analyst and negotiator for over 2 decades. He served as advisor to 6 secretaries of state. So an opinion that we love having on the program. Thank you so much for joining us, Aaron. How much do we make of this? Because, of course, when it comes to U.S.-Israeli relations, to see any light shine between these two allies is quite unusual in the public space.
I mean, it's a good point. The security relationship between the two countries is sound, and as you know, the Israelis and Americans are linked by a common commitment to democratic, pluralistic values. But on 2 key issues, there is not just daylight, there is a significant gap. One on the issue of settlement activity, and a second, which is even more important. Can the 2 countries define a common approach to negotiations with the Palestinians on the 4 core issues that drive the conflict: Jerusalem, borders, security, and refugees? This is not a full-blown crisis, but it is clearly more than a bump in the road. And unless the U.S. and Israel manage to manage this, American policy over the next 6 months is going to look more like a soap opera than it is a policy based on the possibility of significant advances in the negotiations. And this was very unusual to see Vice President Biden, when he was in Israel, his surprise at this decision to go ahead with the settlements was viewed as an embarrassment of a major U.S. official. Secretary of State Hillary Clinton also said that she sees this as possibly a reason that others could exploit for this daylight being shown between Israel and the U.S. Others could exploit this rift. Can they? I mean, is that a right way to read this, that this is an actual risk to Americans? Well, look, if you wanted to create an incident in a laboratory, better designed to embarrass and humiliate an American vice president, you couldn't have found a better series of events. Vice President Biden, by the time he left Israel, appeared to put matters back in the box, but the administration wanted to send a much more severe and profound, or make a much more severe and profound point. So the president, who I think was personally humiliated and still sore from his failed efforts to try to get the Israelis and the Palestinians into negotiations last year, drove home a very tough message to the prime minister. But the reality in the U.S.-Israeli relationship and in the negotiations generally is tough talking points is not a substitute for a policy. At some point, the United States and Israel are going to have to determine whether there is common ground to move these negotiations forward. And the real question is, for this administration, do they want to make a point, or do they want to make a difference? If they want to make a difference, they're going to have to figure out a way to work with the Israelis. I don't think there's any alternative.
All right, Aaron Miller, thank you so much for your perspective joining us today. Aaron Miller at the Woodrow Wilson Center.